Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me in creating a nice square stitch heart to create this love-struck heart pendant. This pendant can be used as a necklace, as a key fob, as an earring, and so many more things. If you need any materials, which are just 15-0s and 11-0 seed beads, check out the links below to shop with us online. Gather up some materials and let's get started. We're going to begin our love-struck design with a size 12 English beading needle on about 4 feet of white wildfire beading thread, 0.006. I have here some 11-0 and 15-0 seed beads. The 15-0s are Miyuki Galvanized Duracoat Gold, and the 11-0s are Miyuki Opaque Red Luster. We're beginning with square stitch, and to do so, we want to begin the square stitch that we have 14 rows of 2 by 2. I want you to put on your thread and needle, leaving yourself just a couple inches at the bottom and hold on to it. 2 11s in the red color and 2 11s in the gold. We're going to let those drop down so we have that 2 or 3 inches at the bottom, and I want you to sew back up through the 2 red 11s coming out prior to the gold. That's going to lay those gold seed beads right next to the red. Again, add 2 red followed by 2 gold. So down through the 2 gold on the left hand or the right hand side. And then you're going to sew up through 4 red on the right hand side. Now naturally you're always going to want to sew through about 3, because what's going to happen is the size difference between the 11 and the 15 is going to lead to a curvature and a bend, which will work really, really nicely for the arched portion of our design. I'm going to continue, so that was my second set of 2. I'm going to continue till I have 14 groups of 2. Number 3 will be the same. 2 11s that will sit on the left, 2 15s that will sit on the right. So down through the last 2 right hand gold. Sew up through 4 red on the left. Again, it's kind of always going to be hard to catch on to that 4th red because naturally it wants to bend in toward the gold. Once you have that done, you're going to keep going to create again 14 groups of 2 for a total of 28 beads. I'm going to keep adding and keep doing this square stitch to add in to start that nice curvature. Once you have 14 groupings of 2 of your ladder stitch, you can see again how this naturally wants to turn because the 15-0s are smaller than the 11-0s, forcing a curvature in toward the 15. From here, this is the top curve of the heart. We're going to do the top curve of the other side, but link them together. To do so, I want you to begin by adding on 1 and 2 of your red, followed by 1 and 2 of your gold. This is the first of 14 to go down the right side. From here, you're not going to go back into that ladder stitch from the previous side at all. You're going to go back through the 2 reds like you're starting the ladder stitch, or the square stitch rather, completely over. See how that has them disjointed here in the middle? That's going to allow you to make that bend for the heart arches. From here, I want you to go down into the gold one more time. And that's going to bring you out toward the center of your heart. In the center of the heart, we need to connect the 2 sides. To do so, I want you to begin with 1 and 2 15-0s, 1 11, and 1 and 2 more 15-0s. You're going to sew into the last 2 15s from the left-hand side of the ladder stitch. That's going to create a nice curve and a center section there where it sits nice and open. To fill in the heart in the center, you're going to come back down just like you were square stitching the 2 red beads that sit above the gold that your thread was coming out of. I'm going to sew through 1 and 2. And now we're going to add 1 more 11-0 seed bead. and we're going to sew through that middle seed bead that sits at the bottom. That's going to fill in that open gap with a little bit more red. Add one more 11-0 and sew through the 2 reds on the opposite side. That completes our turn for the top of our design. So that's going to sit nice and even in that nice heart shape. From here, we're going to continue our ladder stitch. So you already have on here your first set of 14. You're going to continue by doing 2 more of your square, kind of a combo of ladder and square. They're kind of one and the same thing. You're going to do 2 red, 2 gold. So back through the 2 gold that are already there, just like we were doing. And then once again, up through the 4 reds. 1, 2, usually it's easy to catch on number 3, and then sometimes you have to come back for number 4. And then back through number 4. And there you have that. So again, that's number 2 of 14 till we get the exact same curvature on the other side here. Once you're done with your 14 groupings on either side here, you can see that it's time to make straight edges. To make the straight edges that won't have the curvature to them, we're going to need to increase the amount of 15-0 seed beads to the 11-0. So we've been doing 2 to 2, and obviously that's creating a turn that we don't want to happen anymore. So I'm going to do, for my 15th add-on, 2 11-0s and 3 15-0s. I'm going to let that fold down next to my last ladder stitch, turning over and sewing back down through the 2 previous gold beads, just like I would be. So the only difference currently is that I added 3 of my 11s. And then I'm going to sew back up, just like we did previously again, my 3 of the 15s, back up through 4 of the red beads. You can see already how that's going straight and they line up next to one another rather than going further down. We're going to do every other to make it sit correctly. So now I'm going to go in and do another row where I have 2 11s and 2 15s. Back down through the previous 3, because remember we added 3, and then go over to the other side and up through the last 4 11s. So that one I did add 2 again. Now I'm going to go back to 3. 2 11s, 1, 2, 3 15s. So down through 2, because we did 2 on the previous pass, and then up through again my 4 red beads. And see how that addition of the 2s and the 3s are forming that nice straight line. I'm going to continue that for 1 more stitch. So I have the group of 3 there. I'm going to do a group of 2, 2 11s, and 2 15s. So down through the 3 15s that are there. And you can see the bridge thread if you can't remember whether or not you need to go down 3 or 2 beads that you did previously. And then up through those 4 red beads. That's going to get us that straight side to reach the bottom of our piece. We need to turn the corner now in order to connect and make a straight piece to go to our starting side. So just to show, after your 14 groups of 2, you're doing 1 group of 3, 1 group of 2, 1 group of 3, 1 group of 2. That gets us to this bottom section here. For the bottom section, it's going to be a little bit different. We are doing 2 reds to 1 gold 15. And that's going to create the curvature to the bottom. Going in here then, we're increasing that curvature drastically. Going in then to the 2 of our 15s that sit at the base, and then back up again through those 4 beads to turn the corner. Back up through then that last one here. And just that addition of that gold 2 red. We'll kind of turn the corner as we go in to connect the design to the other side. To complete the turn then, I want you to add 2 more red beads. Go back into the gold bead that's already there. So you 2 red beads, no gold beads. Give a nice tight pull. And then you're going to sew back through the 2 red beads. That makes that complete turn at the end here. Now we're going back in to connect the sides to go from our 2-3 pattern. So 2 of our reds, 2 of our gold, back into that single gold that's there, and then up through the last 4 red beads. Once you're up through the last 4 red beads along the side here, then you're going to add a series of 2 of our red beads, 2 of our red beads, and then 3 of our gold beads. And you're going to do that 2 times before we get ready to add kind of that final row. So we're doing the opposite where we had our 2 and then 3, 2, 3. And then we're going to connect the sides together. So I just did a grouping of 2. I'm going to add 2 more 11s, 1, 2, and 3 golds. Push those down next to the previous ones. Holding that there, I'm going to sew down through my last 2 gold 15s. And this will even up this square stitch row. And then up through the 4 reds. That was my first grouping of 3. Now I'm going to go back to a group of 2. Down the last 3 15s. After adding my 2 reds and 2 golds. Back up through the 4 reds on the left. And then I'm going to do my last group of 3 golds. 2 reds go on, 3 golds, down through the 2 on the left. I'm sorry, the 2 there. And then up through your 4 seed beads on the right-hand side. Once you're finished with that, we're going to connect our sides together. So we're going to go in now and work to connect these 2 together to finish up our heart. To join our sides together, I have my needle on the first beads, those first 2 red beads, coming out the red beads along the bottom here. I'm going to sew up through the first 2 red beads and then down through the 2 gold beads on that same starter side. And you're just thinking of this kind of like a zipper, going down then through those 3 15-ohs and patchworking, sewing our heart together so you can't even see any variation between the 2. What I'm going to do now is put this kind of to the side after I tie my thread ends. So I'm going to completely finish this off, tying the thread ends. I'm going to go back through the gold, make sure that this connection is seamless, and then we're going to work on our arrow for our piece that is going to lay right on the top of the heart. Next, we're going to create the arrow to sit on top of our heart. I'm going to do the exact same 2-drop square stitch, adding in 4 11-ohs, going back up through the first 2, and I'm just holding again the bottom of the thread. And I did fuse the thread together to finish up my heart. And again, 2 beads, 2 beads, so 4 total, down through the 2 on the right-hand side, and then up through the 4 on the left. Because I'm using all 11-oh seed beads here, as I do this 2-drop square stitch, this is going to go straight rather than curve. So it's not going to have any of that curvature to it like the heart did. Because we're using all the same size bead, this will run straight along the line to make this arrow. I'm going to keep adding in my square stitch steps until I have my 10 groupings of 2. So there I have 3 groupings of 2, 7 more to go. Once you have on 10 of your square stitch rows, we're going to add row number 11, so still 2 beads, for a total of 22 by 2, so you have 24 seed beads, or sorry, 44 seed beads on here. I'm going to go back up through my 4 on the left, and then I'm going to start to create my arrow. To do so, we're going to take 1 and 2 more 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to square stitch this onto the side 2 seed beads that my thread is coming out of. See how that sits right there next to it? I'm going to go down in the 2 that I just created, add 2 more, so down through the 2 that I have already on there, and that'll get ready to start my arrow. From here, I need to go backwards because I need to add 2 more on the other side. So I'm going to go back into that original square stitch. And I'm going to repeat the same thing on the opposite side. So going into the last 2 beads here, on the right, add 2 more, down through the beads that your thread is currently coming out of, and then up through those 2. Add 1 more on, 1 and 2, up through that middle, and then down through the end. That's going to be both the way that we do the start to the arrow, as well as the bow portion at the bottom of the piece. Once you're done adding your little square stitch to the side here, you will have a total of 6 rows of beads. We're going to use this to create brick stitch. So I'm going to put my thread and needle coming out the bottom of that last row back up through bead number 1 toward the top. You'll see a tiny bit of thread on the exterior, but you really won't notice it. If you want to, you can put a 15-0 seed bead on, and that will go ahead and cover up that thread a little bit. From here, we're going to go in with our red beads. And what I want to do with the red beads is do some brick stitch. So 2 red beads go on, skip over the bridge thread number 1 right there, and you're going to sew into the second bridge thread. So up through then bead number 2 toward bead number 1, which is going to be the start of brick stitch. See how that lays right on top of there? Now brick stitch naturally gets smaller. So we had 6 beads worth of our rows of seed beads below. We're going to add 5 total here. We added 2 to start, then 1 bead. So underneath that bridge thread there, back up through that bead, and out the top. If you need help with brick stitch, keep in mind we have tons of brick stitch videos. Add a bead, go underneath the bridge threads that are next from the previous row, and up through the bead that you just added. Add your 5th bead through that stitch, and then up through that final 5th bead. When you pull, you can see that triangle shape starting to happen. From here, 2 beads go on, and we're going to have 4 total on this row. Because I'm adding 2 beads, because I don't want to see any thread, that's the reason for that. You're going through your second bridge thread, and then up through the second bead. Add another bead through the bridge thread, and you're going to continue this the whole way till you have 1 single bead to add on the top. So I've got my 2, so you can see me kind of speed beading. Now remember, when I'm doing this, you can always slow me down in the settings of the video. Underneath where my head is, there's usually a little wheel. You can go in and slow down the video. Here I am on my row of 3 beads. I have 2 beads that I'm putting on once, going up through that second bead, turning it on its end. Adding my 3rd and final bead, going through that bridge thread. And again, with the ladder stitch, with the brick stitch, it's naturally going to get smaller. So that's what is helping to get into my point. Now I'm to the point where I have 2 beads that I'm going to add, 1 and 2. So through that second bridge thread, back up through bead number 2, and as you come out of bead number 2 now, you're to the section where you just need one final bead. Add that one final bead and sew down through bead number 1 from the previous row. You can see that got my nice triangular point for my arrow that's going to sit on my heart. What I'm going to do now is sew down through that heart, because we're going to add on to the other end as we go in and create our little bottom section of our heart, or of our arrow rather. To do so, I'm going to sew down through the last row of seed beads along the side of my arrow. Get that nice point there. And then I'm just going to sneak between my ladder stitch rows. So there goes one, going up through those 2, down through, and then take your thread and needle, and you are running the whole way down this long line of beads. You might need to take your needle out in the middle if it doesn't want to pop out, but you should be able to get your needle the whole way down, going the whole way down one row of that stitch. Coming out then, I'm just going to grab because it's little and bring my thread and needle out toward the bottom. Now you can see you have your nice point done, and we just need to go in and sew into it our bottom section of our piece, our little feathers basically of our arrow. So along the bottom when I get down, I'm going in and I'm adding in 2 more of my brick stitch, or my square stitch beads here. So I've added 4 beads, and I'm just like we've been doing, super repetitive. We're sewing up through those 4 beads on the left after adding 4 more. And we're going to get in. Now if you want your arrow to sit bigger or smaller along the piece, you can do that by just extending the ladder stitch. From here I have the start of the arrow being at the end of the heart and the start of the point of the arrow being at the top. So that's how I know exactly where I'm going to go in and create the top and the bottom and how many rows I want in the middle. Now to create the bottom, we're going to start in the same way that we did when we went in and created the top. I'm going to add 2 beads onto my needle and thread, and I'm going to sew back into the 2 my thread are coming out of. Sew back through the 2 that I just added and add 2 more. Go into the beads from the opposite end and go through the 2 beads that I just added. You can see how that got just that same effect of that group of 3. Sneaking back through, I'm going to go up through, back through the beads that I just added, back through the ladder stitch, because I want to get to the other side of the arrow. On the other side of the arrow then, you can see I'm on the left-hand side, going down the right. I'm going to exit after 2 beads. Do the same thing now on the right-hand side where you're adding 1 and 2. Sewing back through the 2 beads that your thread was coming out of. So up through the 2 beads that you just added. Add 2 more beads. So this is the exact same thing that we did at the top of the arrow when we did our point. So into the 2 beads that your thread is coming out of. Back down into the 2. At this point, your thread and needle will be coming out toward the point section. I want to sew back up through bead number 2 on the right-hand side, through those 2 beads. And I'm going to use this as my opportunity to kind of make this into more of a point section. So to do so, I want you to take one of your 15-ohs, one 11-oh, and one 15-oh. You're going to skip over the next 2 beads, followed by the following 2 beads, and I want you to sew down through your second set of beads in from the right. When you pull this then, it creates a little bit of that kind of bowing effect, that they sit on a slight angle. From here, we're going to connect our bow to our heart, as well as embellish the center with some gold beads. Once you're out through those 2 beads, it's time to sew our arrow onto our heart. Now, if you want to keep these separately, obviously you can do so, but if you want to sew them together, you're going to look right back near where you have your thread knotted together from the heart, and that's where we're going to add the arrow, which is nice because then it's going to kind of conceal it a little bit. It'll be to the back side, but I have my arrow sitting below my heart. I'm coming out of those 2 central beads, and I'm going to sew into the bead that's the bead right before my knot. So 1 bead up, basically. Take my thread and needle through that singular bead, which you may kind of need to turn to the side a little bit, and want to sew through the knot. So it's going to want to stick to its partner there. Just wiggle your needle in between the 2. Once that needle is out, then take your arrow. Again, it's going to be in front of the heart. And I want you to sew into the 2 beads on the right-hand side of the arrow base. And there you have it. This is now attached to the bottom of the heart, sitting right simply on top of it. From here, I want you to bring your thread and needle to the top of the arrow section. To get to the point of the arrow, in order to connect it to the other side of the heart here, what I want to do is add some 15-0 seed beads that run along the central line. To do so, we're going to add the 15s, and we're going to utilize the bridge threads that sit between. You're going to grab some of your 15s here, come on out, add 1, 2 15s, and sew underneath that first bridge thread line. Those 2 15s are going to sit right in the middle of that stitch. Add 2 more 15s, sew through your next bridge thread of that square stitch. And you can see how that's going to add and just give a little bit of that hint of gold right on top of the design. I'm going to continue sewing up, adding 2 beads between each one of my bridge threads there, so I have that nice central line of gold beads to highlight my arrow before I get to the top to join it at the top of the heart. As you get to the top of the arrow, you'll come out the last bridge thread, and you'll have a nice way of going right into an 11-0 seed bead that sits on top. You add 2 more beads, and then when you look at your brick stitch, you'll have a nice way to kind of skip a row of brick stitch and sew into that final bead. When we're in that final bead then in the center of the brick stitch, 1 down from the end, you can see kind of right there, we're in the middle right before the point. That's how we're going to attach to our other side of our piece. To attach to the other side of the piece, you're going to sew through your arrow and through your square stitch along the base. So you're just literally sewing right through. Give a nice tight pull, and that lays the arrow right on top of the heart. From here, you're going to go underneath the bridge thread, or connect to the bridge thread that's right there, and sew back up through the top of the piece of the arrow. So I'm not too worried about where I'm coming out, where my thread is going. I'm just making sure that I'm catching on to the bridge thread that sits below the arrow, going on, and I'm going to go a step below it and come out again into my heart. So I'm sewing down through my arrow, back into another section of the heart, and catching on again to those bridge threads. So my arrow is permanent now on my heart, and what I want to do is get ready to add in my wire guards to have my necklace come out on. I'm going to go into my heart, and I'm going to sew through the exterior here up to the top of my heart arch, and that's where I'm going to add my first wire guard. I'm going to add them so that they're on the corners of the heart, sewing into the sides. Coming out that seed bead along the top, I have my wire guard, and I'm going through the side of my gold wire guard, around through the top, and it's a lightweight, very simple necklace pendant, so I'm not going to worry too much about reinforcing, but I'm going to skip back 2 beads so the wire guard sits nice and in the middle, and then sew through and along my exterior row to add my wire guard onto the other side. Now if you want to, you can do a simple chain, and if you are doing a chain, you'll want to link that in to the wire guard as you are creating. I'm sewing across and down through all of my red beads here to get to the other side. When I come to the middle, I'm going to go through my bead that's my 3 beads that kind of sit in the middle. So going through bead number 1 there, going down through the middle bead because I don't want to make the point obsolete. Go in here and then back up through. What you can do then is count over how many beads. So I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 beads over, and then I'll get ready to put on my wire guard. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and my next bead will be number 11. I'll also want to sew through 12 and 13, since that's where my wire guard is going to connect. Grab my next wire guard, go up through the wire guard, and then down through the other side. When I come out the other side, I'm going to sew down through beads number 12 and 13, and just sew right along the exterior of the heart line then. When I get down to the exterior of the heart line, I'm going to bring this stop bead or that starter thread to the back and simply tie the knots off together right there along the back of my bow section of my love struck heart. After doing so then, I'll go in very, very simply and create a nice little gold chain with my seed beads to add to the sides of my heart. To do the chain portion of the heart, you can choose if you want to just add a regular chain like I said, or do a nice simple chain with your seed beads and your 15 O's and your 11 O's. I did my 15s and my 11 O's in a pattern of 10 of my 15s to 1 of my 11. I did this repeated about 6 to 7 inches on each side because I want it to be fairly short so the heart sits right inside. If you want it to be a little bit longer, you can do more on the sides. From here, at the very last section after my last red bead, I went ahead and added 13 15-0 seed beads. So all the rest were 10, and then I sewed through my wire guard. So back through your 11-0 seed bead, and the whole way up along your line here of your seed beads. This is going to reinforce that line of seed beads and also make it so it sits really nicely on that wire guard to the side. From here, you're going to go back up to the top of the piece and add on a wire guard. On one side of the wire guard, you're going to add your clasp, and on the other side, just a loop or a split or a jump ring. I'm going to continue going the whole way up along that line of seed beads. And once I get to the top, I'll show you how I'm going to add the wire guard on and tie a knot from just a simple stop bead that I had put on to start this side of the chain. Once you're back up to the top of your piece, I'm going to add my last 11-0 because I started with the 15s and just a stop bead there. I'm going through the wire guard, back down the wire guard, adding my clasp on to my thread and needle, so that way it sits inside the wire guard, and you can use any sort of clasp for this. I'm just using a lobster that I have sitting here. And I'm going down then through that 11-0 seed bead. I'm going to tie a knot here by removing my stop bead. And then what I'm going to do to double that down is I'm going to go back through then, after the knot, go back through the wire guard, back through the clasp, back down, and tie a second knot on, so that way I have a nice ending for the end of the piece to create the 2 sides of chain that go to the side of this love-struck heart. Thanks so much for joining me in creating this love-struck necklace. Remember, if you do need any materials, go ahead and check out the links below to shop with us online. Remember also to give a little comment if you make any changes, any suggestions, or have any ideas that could help out your fellow beading community. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. As always, have fun creating, Post your designs of this Love Struck necklace in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making, and enjoy making this in a multitude of different ways.